We know you're from Trinidad and Tobago, a place I seem to be gravitating to, as you know, in my conversation with Shaka Hislop. So how did you grow up in Trinidad and Tobago and really sort of your journey, in your early part of your life?
I find myself reflecting on it very often. And in fact, just this weekend at a wedding with a lot of Trini friends of mine, I was talking about the fact that I grew up in a utopia. The sun was always shining. Well, we have a rainy season there too, but when you grow up in a country where the prime minister looks like you, the president looks like you, people are getting scholarships to go to Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard. I grew up in a utopia. Trinidad is outside of the hurricane belt, great weather, oil in the ground, fantastic education system. I grew up in utopia. I just didn't know it at the time. So I grew up sort of upper middle class, jetting off to the United States every summer. And I didn't know how good I had it. Now that I'm an adult, and I've been an adult for quite some time, I think I look back at Trinidad and I realized that not only did I have it really, really good, but a lot of what has shaped me as a human being is because of where I was born. And I think most people would say this, but I really am a believer that I know I didn't grow up in necessarily the richest country in the world or whatever, but I would not have changed where I grew up for anything, because so much of where I was born and how I grew up informed who I became as a person.
Was there any other sort of sports that were really there before you gravitated into sort of athletics, or was athletics always sort of top of the agenda?
Well, at 5'9", I always say, it's actually an example that I use when I'm coaching. It's like, look, you can aspire all you want. I could aspire to be, to play center for the Los Angeles Lakers or forward for United, Manchester United. But I was only 5'9", so I loved the basketball, always did, played that quite a bit. But of course, football was my thing. There's no way you could grow up watching Diego Maradona and the stars of that era and not want to do that. I look at the sport I eventually ended up in, track and field, and realize that quite a few of the people who are really good in track and field. I think of John Regis. I think of Frankie Fredericks. Those guys started in soccer and football as well. So yeah, there was no other path for me as far as I was concerned when I was young. I was going to be a soccer star. I wasn't even that much into cricket and I don't think I've ever played an organized cricket game other than, what we call in Trinidad a fet match, which is basically more hanging out than playing. But yeah, I think anybody who you'd ask about my history and who knew me when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 would be very surprised that I turned out to be Trinidad and Tobago's first, world champion in athletics, because that was not the path that I was on at the time. And it really just came accidentally. I always say my athletic gifts came late. So I was a decent athlete when I was growing up in Trinidad, but my gifts came to me at about 16, and I was on a football field, I think at 16, and just kind of blowing past people on the field and thinking to I liken it to Clark Kent discovering the the meteorite in the barn from Krypton, and that sort of told him that he was different. That's really how it felt for me. That summer was the summer of 1991, where I just went, oh, this is different. I pushed the ball past somebody and they disappear. And at that point, I'd already been discovered for a year. I was discovered in New York when my family emigrated there. But there was something about those 2 years, 90 and 91, that I just went, okay, so there's clearly something here. And I really worked hard at it. And I think the individuality of athletics, I think, is what took me out of football and into athletics.
What was the moment where you went, okay, really competing at this? Was there a definitive moment where you take the step up from sort of collegiate level up to sort of the pro level, as I put it, was that definitive step where you say, okay, I'm fast, as it were, and then you realise, oh, hold up, there's a difference between what I've potentially got here, but now I can really compete on a global. That real sort of jump where I don't know whether it's in training or a certain meet that you did. That was a definitive moment in time when you looked at yourself and thought, wow, yeah, with more training, with more coaching, these that I can really make this.
Two moments for me. And it's funny because one involves somebody who I recently reconnected with and now talk to him almost every day on social media. There's a guy called Adrian Bob that went to my high school in Trinidad with me. I believe he was my year. If not, he was a year ahead of me. He was Carifta champion in several events. Carifta is like the Caribbean Junior Championships, but a very prestigious, it's the place that it's the meet that a guy like Usain Bolt would have passed through, Johan Blake, Shawnee Miller-Weibo, anybody, Veronica Campbell-Brown. If you are a Caribbean sprinter of note, chances are you were a Carifta champion. He was I'm sure he had every junior record possible for Trinidad and Tobago. And he was, was kind of a celebrity in our school, kind of a man-child, developed early. I remember him having a beard when none of us could even grow one single facial hair. His name was Adrian Bob. And I remember looking at him and thinking, wow, not in a million years could I be him. When I moved to New York, he was attending South Shore High School in Brooklyn, and I was going to Jamaica High School in Queens. And he and I had a 55-meter race indoors, and I beat him. And I remember going back home and telling my mother, you are not going to believe who I beat today. I beat Adrian Bob today. And she, of course, growing up, she having spent time in Trinidad, she's Jamaican, said to me, oh, really? Okay. And off we went to the East Bay catalog at the time to buy me some proper footwear. So that was the first thing that kind of gave me an inkling of, whoa, wait a minute. This is not like, you're not the athlete you were before. You're beating Adrian Bob, the legend Adrian Bob. Fast forward to, so that would have been 1990. Fast forward 5 years later, I now am enrolled at UCLA, training under John Smith, who was coaching, among many others, Marie Jose Perec and John Regis, actually, at the time, the British great. But he was also coaching Dennis Mitchell, who in 1994 was Track and Field News #1 100-meter sprinter in the world. It was a big controversy because a lot of Brits thought that probably should have been Linford. I don't know. I can't remember at the time what I thought. But anyway, he said, my coach, sort of seeing that I probably needed better competition than the people who I was teammates with at the university level, invited me to come train with Dennis Mitchell, John Drummond, John Regis, and his pros occasionally, thinking sort of, let me put him in the deep end of the pool and see if he can really swim. Now, I'm used to that. That's actually how they teach you to swim in Trinidad. They throw you in the ocean, and if you survive, you know how to swim. And I mean, for the most part, they were killing me. But it took a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, I was not only competitive, I was beat. And I look back now, I'm an analyst. This is what I do for a living on television. I'm like, John Drummond is one of the top 5 starters that I've seen in my life, and Dennis Mitchell ain't too far behind. And I started to beat them occasionally. And once again, that was sort of my oh my gosh moment of, oh, if you can compete with this guys, I was 21 at the time. If you can compete with these guys who were #1 in the world and who were this and that, and I mean, Dennis was Olympic medalist and world championship medalist at the time. That was my other aha moment. Like, okay, there is clearly something there. And if you work at it, maybe, great things are possible for you.
There is definitely a running theme. I've had the conversation with Kevin Young, had the conversation with Roger Black, and various others in terms of who they've gone to sort of train with at various points. Very similar to yourself in terms of training with a group. It takes me back to the days of when you went like Floyd of hair. Santa Monica, Carl Lewis, legendary. It's a bit of a sort of folklore, isn't it, now when you think of it? But it is carried through, though, isn't it, over the years in different types of groups and training groups and all these different things over the years. And so it never gets old. You train and learn from the best. Probably this is your standards. Like you said, you've said that, Kevin Young was saying in his early days being absolutely flawed, and then bit by bit, pretty much what you've said there. And it just goes to show, I remember Roger Black saying that he had to really move, over to the US. They moved. They were literally no money whatsoever to literally train with the best to raise their standards. And it just rings so true across so many great performers, what they've had to do.
And your point about the groups is well made, because Santa Monica was the first kind of really mega track team. And when HSI came around, we patterned ourselves after them. We saw what they did and we said, okay, we want to do what Carl was for the most part. I mean, excuse me, Santa Monica was for the most part Carl Lewis and Leroy Burrell. There were other guys in there, Mike Marsh, but we wanted to be almost like a boy band. At the time, I remember us thinking of that, where it was like, you're gonna like our group because somebody's personality in this group is gonna appeal to you. So the way I see it, certainly in this side of the world, it was Santa Monica Track Club started it. We took it, and I think we did. I mean, we did things that I know were never done before. We had a reality television series in 2003, all over Eurosport. It's called The Sprinters. You can look it up on YouTube. And I look back at that and I go, this is really good. And kudos to our manager and attorney Emmanuel Hudson, because he had the vision for things. I mean, I had a reality show before the Kardashians, really? So once we had our heyday, and then our group, I mean, our group is still very loaded. We have Christian Coleman, we have Dalilah Muhammad, we have Michael Norman, all world and Olympic champions. But once we were done, MVP, the group that gave you Shelly Ann Fraser Price and Elaine Thompson Hira and Asafa Powell, they openly admitted, yeah, we looked at what HSI did and we wanted to be better than them. So I think there is there is a sort of a copycat element to how those groups, certainly the last two that I mentioned, kind of came about and flourished. And there is something to be said for getting a great coach and handing him talent and just sort of sitting back and letting the results come out. That it's a formula that I think is always going to be used, certainly in the sport.
This is what we always find about mindset and motivation, is that it takes a lot to keep pushing yourself to keep getting better. And this is what I love about obviously bringing yourself on board, is the fact that you're producing world-beaten and phenomenal time. Touch on obviously Atlanta, which is for me one of the most iconic races ever. It's just I look at certain moments in athletics, and that was just one I just circled around. It's like, wow, what a moment to have so many great athletes perform ridiculously well at the same time. And it was just like, you're running fast, I'm going to run faster, and I'm going to run faster. And it's like a horse race where I would say you've got three thoroughbreds at the peak of their powers, all going great guns at the same time. And to be honest, whoever wins, obviously from your perspective, you want to win, but from an actual audience perspective, your jaw just drops. And it's, I suppose, the equivalent of having like Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, to be topical of these times, and Steph Curry or Magic Johnson all on the court at the same time, going up against each other up and down the court, is the same analogy as I'd use to that race. Is that to have those sort of performances at the same time, it stands an ovation for me, because in the history of athletics, you were in an era of absolute supreme legends. When you move on from such iconic times as, the Olympics, being world champion, such ridiculously fast races, amazing performances, how do you cope with, I suppose, sort of life after that? Because I know you've gone on, obviously coaching, was it a bit of politics as well? You've been involved in, I know you've done commentary as well. So you've got a lot of different elements. How do you cope with life after the sort of the glitz, the glamour, the light bulbs, and all those elements? I know, I don't know if you keep a pair of your shades sort of tucked away for a rainy day, but
I think if you don't confuse who you are with what you do, the transition is very easy. So I retired. I got injured in a car accident. A drunk driver hit me head on in 2002 in Trinidad. So by 2003, I was a shadow of my former self, and by 2004, I was like, well, I've had enough of it, so I'm done. So I retired in 2004. I was 30. And everybody said, oh, 30 is too young. You're going to come back. And I went, yeah, watch. Because I knew I had other things to do. And I knew I had 30 was very young. Although I didn't feel young at the time. I'd love to be 30 now. And I remember thinking, I am going to find things that I am passionate about. And as long as you can feel, because the only thing that can sustain you when you are an athlete is your passion. So, and I've heard Boris Becker talk about this at a forum that I was at called Doha Goals. He says the athlete part of you has to die for the other one to thrive. And I thought, and when he said it, everybody went, oh, and I went, absolutely, amen, brother. He's right. When you see athletes hanging around too long, it's because they have not found something to replace the passion. So what did I do within months of retiring? I went and got my pilot's license. That's something that I loved long before I loved track and field. So I put my passion into that. And then the opportunity came. Actually, I started on the BBC in 1999. I was injured in the Seville World Championships. Didn't want to go. Got coerced to go. And it ended up being amazing because the BBC said, hey, well, he's here. He's not running. Maybe he wants to come on our air and be a pundit. And I did that, really enjoyed it. The response was really good, which I was shocked at. And that was kind of the top line in my resume, you know, part of the coverage for the, you know, for the BBC World Championship coverage of 1999. So now I found another thing I was passionate about. The broadcasting, you know, I think people, you know, maybe people get into broadcasting because they want to be on TV. Look, I've been famous since I was 18. Okay, I'm from a little island in the South Caribbean where everybody knows my name. There's the Ato Boldon Stadium. There's people know who I am. So it was never for vanity reasons. I didn't want to be on TV so people would remember me or see me or whatever. I had one specific goal when I got my first opportunity on television after I came back stateside. This is after I retired in 2004. I felt like I was not really happy with the quality of our coverage. To be quite honest, I had always told people I always felt like I could do a better job than the people who were on television. That was the first thing. And the second thing is, in keeping with the whole theme of passion, America is not exactly a track and field country. Athletics doesn't register here the way it registers in Europe or in many other countries, certainly not in the Caribbean, certainly not in a place like Jamaica. And I thought to myself, that's my mission. In the same way that when I decided who I was going to run for, I could have run for the States, could have run for Jamaica. My mother's Jamaican. I looked at the drought that Trinidad and Tobago had. No medals since 1976. Hazley Crawford's Montreal win in the 100. And I went, oh, that's a void I can fill. That's something I can change. It's literally the same thing I did when it came to broadcasting. I looked at television and I went, we can be better than this. And two, I want to be the person who makes track and field more popular in the United States. So my reason for getting on television is because I wanted to share my immense passion for athletics with American viewers. And that was it. So now I've never looked back. I've never turned around to look at, you know, oh, what could have been and what did I not do in the sport, and I never got my Olympic gold medal. I didn't have time because I went and got my pilot's license. I was flying up and down California, and then I was on television.
This is what the idea of the channel is, to really map the journey and show people that, look, what you wanted then or what happened here doesn't define everything. You make various decisions in time, various things happen, various variables, and you can make the best of situations. And whether you maxed out a situation, you move on to different chapters in your life. You see what you know where you began, you've seen what you've achieved in the middle. The fact that your mindset is so much more to still live for, to still strive for, to still go after, and you basically you can drink in and embrace what you've done, but leave it there, if that makes sense. So you don't bask in it, as it were. Sure, did a great job, but you're now chasing down the next challenge, the next journey, as it were. You know,
everything I've done, I've asked myself, is this something I'm passionate about? So becoming a professional track athlete, that was a no-brainer. I love the sport. I think it's the greatest sport ever. I love football. I love NFL football. I have about 70 NFL guys who actively play in the NFL now because I get them ready for their scouting evaluation and so on. But everything I've done has been from a place of, am I passionate about it? You mentioned my brief foray into politics. Same thing. People were like, oh, he wants to be popular. He wants to be prime minister. I was like, no, I wanted to see if I could contribute something to my country because I'm passionate about Trinidad and Tobago. As it turned out, I couldn't because that's a whole different podcast. But my broadcasting, my foray into politics, my being a track and field athlete, and even my coaching all stemmed from, is this something that you are passionate about? Because if you are, then it won't feel like work and you'll give your all. If not, then it might not.
For the audience, for the athletes out there, is there sort of 5 tips that you would sort of pass down to either up and coming athletes, regardless of what sport that they're in? Is there sort of 5 tips that you'd pass on to them?
Oh, 5. Let's start with something that we talked about, your group. The people around you have to match your passion, or it's always going to feel like you're out there by yourself. If it's your coach or your training partners or your whoever, that's the first thing. So you have to get around like-minded people, and that will be that will make it a lot easier. 2, don't be afraid to fail. And especially this generation, it's like, oh my gosh, if they stumble and fall, it's the end of the world. It's not. It's not. And older folks know that you have to stumble, and the lessons are in the stumbling. The lessons are in the failing. So that's 2. 3, passion. If you're not passionate about it, very unlikely that it's going to work. I'd say 4, see the end. See the end first. When I started to coach Brianna Williams, I told her, I said, you will be in the Olympics at 18. I was wrong because when she was 18, the Olympics got postponed by a year, but she was an Olympic gold medalist at 19, Jamaica's youngest ever. See the end before you even start or try to see the end. Because as I tell some people, it's like, if I tell you at the end of this journey, there's going to be a pot of gold, you don't worry about the bumps, the flat tire, the engine breaking down along the way, because you go, no, because I'm confident that at the end of this, there's going to be some gold. So you have to almost see the end goal, so that you are constantly thinking about what's at the end, as opposed to, well, I didn't have a good day today, or last week was bad, or this month was crap. The last thing that I would probably say is, don't take it so seriously. I look back at my own career and I think to myself, you'd have enjoyed your career more if you had more fun. I was a little obsessive. I traveled around Europe with a scale, and if that scale didn't say exactly the number I wanted, I let that affect my whole day, and sometimes I let it affect my races. I realize now that my analytical brain was getting ready for broadcasting, and I think it's what's made me a good broadcaster and probably hurt me as an athlete. And I remember one critique of me, which I hated at the time but was dead on, is Maurice Green feels his way through 100. And Ato Boldon tries to think his way through 100. And that bothered me so much. And of course, truth hurts. At the time when I heard it, it probably bothered me because I knew he was dead on. That was actually said by Craig Masback, who is a good friend of mine and a former Nike executive now. So my last thing would be, don't take it so seriously. None of us are getting out of this thing called life alive. And if you are so privileged to have a career, whether it ends in the Olympics on a podium where you never see a medal, or it ends in being city or county champion or national champion, enjoy it, because when it's over, all you have are the memories.
Ato Boldon, honestly, you got me speechless on those 5 on that front. What I would say is absolute privilege to have yourself in conversation with us today. I'll pass your regards on to Shaka as well when I catch up with him next.
Before I go, let me give you a quick Shaka story. Shaka went to my rival high school in Trinidad, but I always had this secret admiration for him. I couldn't admire him openly because he was, was playing for England, and he was like one of the best goalkeepers in the history of our country, certainly. So here I was at his rival high school I'm a little younger than he is, maybe about 3 or 4 years, looking at him and going, wow, look at how he carries himself, and look at how good he is, and he's well-rounded, he's brilliant, but he's a brilliant goalkeeper as well. So fast forward now, I don't know how many years, I got into the business first, And Shaka, who, again, I've known Shaka since we were kids, he calls me up and he says, hey, I'm thinking about getting into broadcasting. And, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, the money is a lot less than what I was making as an athlete. And I went, yeah, that's kind of how it is. But here's the thing, Shaka, you get into the party, and then you make your way to the dance floor, and then you show him you can dance. So I look at Shaka and all the success that he's had as a broadcaster, and feel like I had a small part in that, but the truth is, it was just me paying him back for being an inspiration to me when I was younger. So it's funny how that came full circle for the two of us.
Well, just lastly from my side, Ato, then the great thing about both of you is you're both very grounded, both down to earth. It's an absolute pleasure, from my side to actually have a conversation with both of you. There's no arrogance, there's no hairs of races. You're literally both down to earth and truly inspirational. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today, Ato, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You're welcome. You too.
Thanks, Ato. Take care.
Take care.